This week we transition from the regulations of civic peace to the assembly of an edifice that sat at the epicenter of ritual life, and there is barely a more aesthetically exquisite parsha. We read of copper altars and golden angels, of kaleidoscopic curtains and gilded tables. We listen to a litany of skins and spices and radiant oracular devices that fill our minds with images of majesty and leave us struck by the sheer magnificence of the Mishkan. But our sages refuse to be satisfied with a world of sacred aesthetics bereft of meaning, so they sift the text for signals of profundity and attend to every letter and inflection with the intention of exhuming moral truths. And in the case of the wooden beams that bore the woven seams of the tabernacle's cover, there is an excess that draws their attention. Va'asita et hakrashim lemishkan atzei shitim omdim. You shall make the krashim, the beams, for the tabernacle, atzei shitim omdim, from acacia wood standing up. And this is their question. What does it matter whether the human beings sculpting the beams are standing or sitting? For none of the other vessels is there a requirement for the workers to stand or stoop or sit or squat. So why on earth is there a need to dictate the posture or pose of the people who chisel the timber of the Mishkan's perimeter? And while one line of the Harachayim does indeed see this verse as insisting on the carpenters standing, every other one of the commentators reorients the grammar to see that word, omdim, as qualifying the position of the beams, not the people. And they do this in two radically different ways. The Chizkuni sees this need for the beams to be standing as speaking to the condition of the trees that are being used. Shelo yikchu atzei shitim noflim, that one should not take acacia trees that have already fallen, v'hatzutzim yamim rabim, or were cut down a long time ago, shikvar nirkavu, which have already begun to decay. These beams for the Chizkuni cannot be gathered off the forest floor, for these trees need to be fresh, they need to be omdim, still standing. Whether they are riddled with rot or merely a residual crop from another project, the Mishkan must be girded by a set of purpose-built, dependable beams that are made to last. Because despite the intention for its interim status, the tabernacle is not to be built on the back of precarious beams assembled from pieces discarded or slowly decomposing in a spirit of convenience or expediency. That was the Chizkuni. On the other hand, we have the Ibn Ezra and the Sforno and the Rashbam and Rashi and the Orachaim, who say that the need for these beams to be standing does not speak to their condition as trees before being felled, but to the direction in which the wood is stood once it is held in place in the Mishkan. Ha'orech hu hagova. The length, the long side, is to be vertical. V'kacha ha'adam ka'ashehu omed, just as a person is when they are standing. This is the Ibn Ezra's version. V'hafach zeh b'shichvo, as opposed to lying down. The acacia trees are to be fashioned into vertical standing beams perpendicular to the floor, evocative of the upright human posture. They are not to be stacked or piled or heaped on top of each other despite the relative ease of assembly. They are to be stood side by side, aligning the ground and the sky, not the horizons. And what strikes me about all these readings is that something about these beams in particular mocks them as in need of extra attention. And perhaps that extra attention is to ensure that the perimeter of the tabernacle does not become peripheral. That as a metaphor for all space, the boundary, the bounds, the borders of sacred space, both figuratively and physically, must stand firm, omdim. Because to forge a connection with God, we need to pay attention. We cannot simply meander into an epiphany. We cannot wander into prophecy. We cannot merely amble or saunter into divinity. If we are to foster a sense of providence or muster the force of divine presence, we must endeavor to develop a sacred attunement, to prepare to face heaven with a level of awareness that sees the very ground upon which we walk, the very air which we breathe, the very space in which we exist, to be sacred. These beams, these krashim, strong and upright, omdim, are symbols of how we are to be in the world. They teach pilgrims to reach God by being alert. They teach sinners and penitents and priests to wake up and stand firm. They teach each of us to draw a line in the sand and mark our space as sacred, to seek the face of God in each step that we take and each face that we see. And perhaps not just those beams, but the carpenters themselves did stand as they sculpted the beams which they knew were to teach human beings how to live lives of true meaning. Shabbat Shalom.